Hello, dear students. Welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, daily newspaper analysis. Today is 22nd July 2024, Monday, and today we have few important articles for the discussion. And without any delay, let's start our discussion. And before discussing all of these important articles, let's try to solve yesterday given practice question. So this question is with respect to the Enforcement Directorate. Time and again, I have been emphasizing on Enforcement Directorate is a very important question. So the question is, consider the following statements regarding the Enforcement Directorate. So if you look at the first option, Enforcement Directorate is a statutory body mandated with the investigation of offences of money laundering and violations of foreign exchange laws. It is true that Enforcement Directorate actually deals with the offences which essentially revolves around money laundering and violation of foreign exchange laws, but it is not a statutory body. So Enforcement Directorate is not a statutory body, so therefore this option is absolutely incorrect. This statement is incorrect. And second statement, it is an agency under the Union Ministry of Home Affairs. So this statement is also absolutely incorrect. So this is not part of the Union Ministry of Home Affairs. And third statement, Enforcement Directorate does have the power to take action on its own. So this is also incorrect option, because Enforcement Directorate does not have the power to take action on its own. That is also known as the suo motu action. And the correct answer for this question is D, none. Okay, so none of the above given statements are correct with respect to the Enforcement Directorate, because Enforcement Directorate is not a statutory body, and Enforcement Directorate is not an agency under the Ministry of Home Affairs, rather it is under the Ministry of Finance. And third statement, Enforcement Directorate does not have the power to take action on its own. Now if you look at the explanation for this particular question, so Enforcement Directorate is a multidisciplinary body. So it actually engages, or it actually looks into the investigation of different matters or offenses, including money laundering and violation of foreign exchange laws. Now when we talk about the functioning, Enforcement Directorate is an agency under Department of Revenue, Ministry of Finance, and it is not a statutory body. You just remember this. Enforcement Directorate is not a statutory body, and it is under the jurisdiction of Ministry of Revenue or Ministry of Finance. So when we talk about the genesis, it was formed in 1st May 1956 as Enforcement Unit, and in fact it was later renamed in 1957 as Enforcement Directorate. And in fact the administrative control of the entire Enforcement Directorate is under the Department of Revenue, or it was transferred to the Department of Revenue in the year 1960. So when we talk about the structure of Enforcement Directorate, so the headquarters of the ED is located in Delhi, and it is headed by the Director of Enforcement. In fact, it also has 5 regional offices across India: Mumbai, Chennai, Chandigarh, Kolkata and Delhi, along with 10 zonal offices as well. Now when we talk about the recruitment or the staff in the Enforcement Directorate, so it is actually done directly and by drawing officers from investigation agencies. It essentially comprises of both IAS, IPS and even IRS officers who are part of the Enforcement Directorate. Now when we talk about the tenure of the director of the Enforcement Directorate, so director's tenure can be extended from 2 years to 5 years. So essentially ED director's tenure is 2 years, but it can be extended up to 5 years. Now we need to talk about the jurisdiction of Enforcement Directorate also. So when we talk about the jurisdiction, Foreign Exchange Management Act and Prevention of Money Laundering Act apply to all part of India, and in fact it allows ED to take action against any person. But Foreign Exchange Management Act cases are in civil courts, while Prevention of Money Laundering Act cases are dealt in the criminal courts. And apart from that, ED cannot act on its own, and a complaint to another agency or the police is required for the investigation. that ED actually starts against the instances of foreign exchange loss and even the money laundering cases. So that's about the Enforcement Directorate. And today also I have one more important practice question for the prelims examination. So try to answer this question in the comment section. So this is a very easy and simple question. The question is, minorities which was stated under Indian Constitution Article 30 include which of the following categories of minorities? So option A, linguistic minorities only, option B, religious minorities only, option C, both linguistic and religious minorities, and option D, ethnic minorities. So if you have some basics and if you have already gone through all the fundamental rights, you can answer this question without any doubt. So this is a very easy and simple question. So try to answer this question in the comment section. And so we have also started discussing a mains practice question every day. Recently the the governor's immunity powers are in question, right? So particularly with respect to West Bengal governor, and a woman staff in Raj Bhavan of West Bengal filed a complaint against governor, but governor enjoys certain immunity from both criminal and civil cases, specifically for criminal cases. So a woman staff who actually alleged that governor in the Raj Bhavan sexually harassed her filed a petition in the Supreme Court about the immunities that are actually granted to the governor, that challenging the immunities granted by the Constitution to the governor by Article 361 of the Indian Constitution. So the question is, examine the necessity of re-evaluating the governor's immunity provisions under Article 361 of the Indian Constitution, right? So this is the question. Now, how to approach this question and how we actually structure this question. So whenever you are writing an answer, it is very important that the answer should have a proper structure. So only then it gives you a coherent answer. So well structured, well framed answer will always get more marks. So therefore you just have to focus on the structuring of the answer. That is very, very important. Now if you look at the approach for this particular question, so first you have to write the recent context, why the governor's immunity powers were recently in news. So you can start the question by introducing the recent context about the immunities of the governor, and then in the next part you can write about some constitutional provisions which grants immunity for the governor. And third, after writing those constitutional provisions, you just write what is the need to re-evaluate governor's immunity provisions, and then write a way forward on the office of the governor and write a simple conclusion. So that is how you can approach any question. So that is how you can score good marks. So if you don't have a proper structure in your answer, you may not get good marks. So therefore try to develop an approach, try to structure the answers, and then so you can see a gradual improvement in the answer. So as we have already discussed in the approach, so first introduced this question with a recent context. The context is that Supreme Court of India has been examining the validity of the constitutional immunity which granted to the governors under Article 361 of the Indian Constitution, particularly the cases which involves allegations on governors about the sexual harassment. So this particular case is about the sexual harassment by governor of West Bengal on a woman staffer in the Raj Bhavan, right? So a staff member of the West Bengal Raj Bhavan has accused governor. So governor of West Bengal is CV Anand Bose of sexual harassment. So that's the context, and you can start this answer by briefly mentioning context in the introduction, and then you can write about the governor immunity and the constitutional provisions which granted such immunity for the governor. Now when we talk about the immunity powers enjoyed by the governors in India are granted immunity from the prosecution during their term of office. So whichever term they are in the office. So Article 361 of the Indian Constitution granted them certain immunity from the prosecution against the criminal cases against them. So this article protects them from legal proceedings in both civil and criminal matters. Article 361 so extends some sort of a protection to the governor from both civil and criminal cases, and to ensure they can perform their constitutional duties without any interference or without any undue interference, fear and favor. So therefore, so that is how you can write about the immunity that is being granted to the governor under Article 361 of the Constitution. And the next part, so what is the need for re-evaluating of governor's immunity provisions? So why there is a need to re-evaluate? So the immunity should not protect governors from being prosecuted for illegal acts. For example, any governor who is in the office and he performs certain illegal actions, and those illegal actions are independent from his constitutional functions in the state, so then the immunity should not actually protect the governors from being prosecuted for their illegal acts or even violations of the fundamental rights. So therefore, it is very important that we need to re-evaluate governor's immunity. And secondly, in this particular case, the petitioner actually seeks a clear guidelines, and there should be qualifications on when and how the immunity can be exercised by the governors. Right, so there is no such clarity, there is no such clear-cut guidelines on how and when immunity is being extended to the governor. So it should not be like there is a blanket immunity on the governor for his for his actions, so which are actually illegal in nature. So therefore, a petitioner actually seeks a clear-cut guidelines and qualifications. So how and when the immunity can be exercised to protect governor for his constitutional acts done in the office of governor. So secondly, a petitioner also emphasizes on the need for remedies for the victims of harassment. So this is a case of sexual harassment, not yet proved, but just allegations, and woman accused governor. Okay, so therefore it is expected that there is a need to have remedies. Okay, so there is a need to have remedies for the accused who actually hold higher offices. There should not be a blanket immunity being extended to the office of governor or any other high office. So it is very important that Constitution ensures fundamental rights for everyone. So if governors have been performing their constitutional duties, it is reasonable enough to extend immunity for the governors. But beyond the constitutional duties, if they have committed any illegal acts, the immunity should not be extended. But there is no clarity. Even though there were a number of Supreme Court judgments also, but there is no such clarity on that particular thing. And Rameshwar Prasad versus Union of India case 2016, in this particular case the Supreme Court has given some sort of a judgment with respect to the immunities of the governor. So in this case, Supreme Court has acknowledged governor's complete immunity under Article 361 clause 1 for the constitutional actions. So whatever constitutional acts that the governor will do, so governor will enjoy complete immunity. That was the stand of the Supreme Court in Rameshwar Prasad versus Union of India case 2006. Okay, so but it is only for the constitutional acts, and it allowed the judicial scrutiny for malified actions of the governor while he was in his office. So that was one of the landmark judgment, so which actually emphasizes that this immunity could be extended to the governors for the constitutional actions only. In fact, this particular case has established that while officials' actions are protected, there are mechanisms for the accountability. There should be mechanisms for the accountability for people, or especially the people who are holding the high offices. That was the stand of the Supreme Court. So you can write about that. However, when we talk about how can we defend the immunities granted to the, so you can also introduce this particular dimension. So how can we defend the immunities which are provided to the governor by the Indian Constitution, right? So immunity actually provides essential. So these immunities which are actually provided to the governor are very important to perform their official duties without any fear of litigation, right? So without any undue interference, they have to deliver their functions, they have to perform their duties without any undue interference. So therefore it is very important that such constitutional immunities should be extended to the governor. And in fact, past legal precedents of the Supreme Court also support the need of protecting high officials from the prosecution, so that it could ensure smooth functioning of the office of the governor. So right, so at the state level, office of the governor is very, very important. So such legal protections or providing immunity for the governor from the prosecution would actually ensure a smooth functioning of the governance in the state. So what should be the way forward with respect to the office of governor? So since we have gone through different aspects of the immunity and the need for re-evaluating immunity of the governor, what should be the way forward? So the way forward is that a ruling in this case could actually provide a clarity. So it is expected that there should be a clarity on the immunity powers of governors. So the extent of these immunities or legal protections for governors and other high officials. So it is expected that Supreme Courts would come up with some sort of a clarity on that. When will the legal immunity will be extended to the governor? So all these things. And apart from that, depending on the outcome, there might be changes in the policies with respect to the prosecution of high ranking officials as well, right? So this could be the way forward. And in conclusion, so you can just write that Supreme Court's decision on this matter will be very, very key and important in defining the limits of immunity or legal protection being provided to the governors. And the outcome of the Supreme Court will have a far-reaching implications for the governance, legal accountability and protection of victims' rights as well. So this is how you can conclude this answer. And so we'll proceed into the few important articles for today, right? So one by one we will discuss all these important articles. The first article is with respect to universal immunization program, right? So UWIN, it is a web interface that the union government has recently created to regularly monitor, manage, track immunization of children and pregnant women, right? So for that particular purpose, this UWIN web interface was created. Now what is the context? The context is that UWIN, so that is Universal Immunization Program Web Interface. So UWIN means Universal Immunization Program Web Interface. So it has emerged as a significant initiative in India's healthcare agenda, right? So in fact, this UWIN web interface essentially aimed at digitizing and improving the child vaccination. So yesterday itself we have discussed about the need of immunization and how there are zero dose children in India. So therefore initiatives like UWIN will help in digitizing and improving the childhood vaccination efforts across India. So we'll briefly talk about this UWIN platform. What exactly is this UWIN platform? During COVID-19 pandemic, we used to have a platform called CoWIN platform, right? So there was a platform called CoWIN platform. So this CoWIN platform was also created to regularly track vaccination and even trace the people who are contracted with the COVID-19 virus. So everything, for all those purposes, this CoWIN platform was created. However, this UWIN platform was inspired from the CoWIN platform. And in fact, this UWIN platform essentially captures the vaccination data for the pregnant woman and children under the universal immunization program. So under universal immunization program, so vaccines are being provided for the pregnant woman and the children. So therefore UWIN platform or UWIN web portal would essentially track vaccination under the universal immunization program. And apart from that, when we talk about the UWIN, so it also plays an essential and very important role with respect to registration of individuals to which vaccines have to be administered, and it also helps in management and maintaining digital records. So children's up to 6 years old and even the pregnant mother, they registered using the government ID like Aadhaar and their mobile numbers. And apart from that, this UWIN platform will also manage records of all 25 vaccinations for children and 2 for the pregnant mothers. So therefore it could also generate the vaccination certificate like how COVID platform used to generate while administering COVID vaccines, right? So apart from that, this UWIN platform will also facilitate the creation of Ayushman Bharat Health Account. So Ayushman Bharat Health Account are IDs for a comprehensive health record maintenance, right? So digitization of healthcare, and it helps in better interventions from the government side, because evidence based and data driven policy making is very, very important, and digitization of healthcare would actually further give a fillip to the data driven and evidence based policy making. Now what are the benefits and functionality of this UWIN platform? Now when we talk about this UWIN platform, it had the portability, like a portability in the sense that imagine a children who is already vaccinated in one particular state, but due to some reasons the children and his or her family migrated to another state. So there also the children can be vaccinated, because this UWIN platform essentially have a decentralized data and decentralized method of digital health records. So that essentially ensures portability of vaccine administration among children. And another essential feature of this UWIN platform is that it regularly provide SMS alerts for the parents and for about the upcoming vaccine doses. So therefore it provides reminders regularly for the people who need to get vaccination. So people will not neglect, will not forget the vaccination. And it is also very important that we need to reduce a number of children who did not receive vaccines at all. So those children are known as zero dose children. So therefore essentially this UWIN platform regularly sending SMS based alerts would enhance the compliance with respect to vaccine administration, and it would also reduces the missed vaccination. And apart from that, the UWIN platform will also act as a safeguard against administering incorrect doses, right? So it will not administer the incorrect doses, alerting the healthcare workers on a real-time basis. So this is also very, very important, because when we talk about the healthcare workers at the rural level, ASHA workers and ANMs, so very often they don't get adequate training. So because of that reason, very often they may give incorrect doses, mismanagement of vaccines that actually takes place. But UWIN platform essentially helps in decision support to the healthcare workers on real-time basis at the rural level. And apart from that, this UWIN platform is also linked with the eWIN platform or eWIN network. So this eWIN network is Electronic Vaccine Intelligence Network that was launched by the Union government. So eWIN essentially means Electronic Vaccine Intelligence Network. And this Electronic Vaccine Intelligence Network will play a very important role in inventory management. So vaccine inventory management and regularly tracking and managing the vaccines, and also ensuring efficient vaccine distribution and monitoring across different states, to the decentralized levels. And we need to understand the impact on immunization efforts. So how UWIN platform would actually have an impact on the immunization efforts. So it would actually individualize data. It would help in creating a robust digital health records over the vaccination. So therefore it would actually provide a detailed and individual level vaccination data across the nation. So when we have data with respect to the vaccination, it would help in targeted interventions, and it would also reduces errors over a period of time. And after that, there are certain policy interventions also which can be provided by this UWIN platform, because it provides a centralized data, and centralized data will help policy makers in making informed policy decisions and also implementing strategies, and these strategies and better and informed policy making would actually reduce the number of children who did not receive vaccines at all. And the overall objective of universal immunization program is to reduce a number of children who did not get vaccines, and those children are known as zero dose children, right? So in India, zero dose children are also very high, even very high compared to our neighboring countries. So therefore, UN platform without any doubt will achieve the objective of universal immunization of all children and the pregnant women by protecting them. So thereafter it will protect them from diseases, various life threatening diseases, both children and pregnant mothers. And it would also reduces maternal mortality rate and infant mortality rate. So that is also one of the main and key component of India's sustainable development goals target by 2030. Next important article is with respect to the female labor force participation in both rural and urban areas. And we also knew that there is a substantially higher levels of unemployment in India, but the author has been suggesting that we need to focus on female employment to counter unemployment in India, because female employment has the potential to counter unemployment or growing levels of unemployment in India. How? So we will understand that. Now, when we talk about unemployment rate in India, it has been soaring. So there are number of reasons for increasing unemployment rate. For example, the lack of skills. So that was one reason. Lack of skills was the one reason for a growing unemployment rate. And still we have dependent on agriculture sector, so primary sector. Around 48% of India's population dependent on agriculture sector alone. However, inadequate development of industry would be the another reason. And apart from that, because whenever we talk about the potential of industries in creating large scale employment opportunities, so these industries are very often labor intensive in nature, right? So since they are labor intensive in nature, they would create large scale employment opportunities for the youth. But in India, the problem is that we have inadequate industry base or manufacturing base, and that is one factor. But even if we have micro, small and medium enterprises in the industry segment, most of these MSMEs are in the informal sector, and they are also suffering, facing a lot of problems, right? For example, they lack technology, and they lack the skilled workforce, and apart from that, they also lack access to the institutional credit facilities, and they also lack adequate marketing support. So all these factors, and they are also facing a huge competition from several global rivals. So all these factors have been plaguing this MSME sector. And apart from that, we need to talk about the service sector also. Service sector has been contributing majority portion of India's GDP, but the problem is that service sector is not employment intensive or labor intensive. It has been not creating adequate employment opportunities for the youth, because it is capital intensive in nature. And apart from that, it is also the technology intensive in nature, but it is not labor intensive in nature. And all these factors, apart from that, when we talk about education did not emphasize on vocational education and technical education in the past. So all these factors have been leading to the increasing unemployment in India. But the author has been suggesting that if we increase the female workforce participation, so this female workforce participation has the potential to address the unemployment rate in India. That is what the author's view with respect to the employment. Now we'll understand that. So recent studies and the data from these recent studies have been indicating that the rural and urban dynamics and traditional occupations and policy interventions shows an evolving landscape of women's employment in India, right? So these things which the recent studies have focused on, have been showing an evolving landscape of women employment in India. And most importantly, these studies have focused on female employment to counter unemployment. So how a female employment can be increased to counter unemployment rates in India. Now, first and foremost thing that we need to understand about is the female labor force participation in India, right? So when we talk about the labor force participation of women, there are huge disparities in rural and urban areas. For example, there is a huge contrast or differences in rural and urban areas women engagement in the workforce. For example, in rural areas, the labor force participation has increased significantly by 12% in between 2018 to 2022. So therefore, this has been indicating that the rural women have been making a shift towards the economic participation. But contrasting thing is that in urban areas, there is actually a modest increase in the women participation in the workforce. So therefore, it has been indicating that the rural women have more opportunities to engage in the economic activities. But on the other hand, urban areas, women do not have adequate opportunities outside their traditional gender-based roles. So that is the one factor which has been hindering women's workforce participation in the urban areas. But when we talk about the women in rural areas, women actually engage in a wide variety of areas. For example, women actively take part in the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, and women also actively take part in the agriculture sector, either as agricultural laborers or the workers in the agriculture sector. So that is another major thing. And in fact, apart from agriculture, they also engage in allied activities or allied sector. For example, we need to talk about the dairy farming, sericulture, apiculture, and aquaculture, in all these poultry also. So women actively engage in all these activities in the rural areas, and that is the reason for the substantial increase in the women workforce participation in rural areas compared to the urban areas. But in urban areas, women do not have adequate opportunities. And in fact, traditional occupations also impact women's labor force participation, because when we talk about women's traditional occupations, so they essentially practice occupations like bandhani and embroidery. So they are having a lot of flexibility and the ability to work from home. So they can also work from home with this traditional home-based occupations. So this particular choice of women influenced by social norms and even the perceived security of these roles. So despite lower incomes which are being offered by these traditional roles, women have been preferring to engage in these limited economic opportunities. So that is another major factor which has been disincentivizing women's participation in the workforce, especially in the urban areas. But we should not forget the role of self-help groups. They actually play in increasing women's workforce participation in the economic activities and increasing employment opportunities, because see, self-help groups very often have access to microfinance, and through microfinance they can start a small units, food processing units, aquaculture units, dairy farming units, apiculture units, sericulture units, right? So they can start such units and they can also provide employment to some more women. So therefore, these self-help groups have supported women in traditional occupations. So in fact, now self-help group women also have access to skill training and marketing linkages also, because government, as part of empowering women, has been providing skill training and even marketing support, hand-holding support to these SHG based groups. And these efforts actually enhance the earnings and even empower the woman economically. So they make a woman self-reliant, independent, so in the financial matters within those particular local contexts, and it will also contribute to women empowerment over a period of time. So however, women's participation in the workforce is not free from the challenges. However, even though there are number of challenges, even opportunities also for the women's engagement in the workforce. Now, when we talk about the challenges that the women have been facing whenever we talk about their engagement in the workforce, urban areas have been presenting a lot of challenges for the women. So they present a lot of challenges for the women, such as they used to have a limited employment opportunities in the urban areas. So outside their traditional roles, urban areas actually provide a very limited employment opportunities for the women, and that is one factor which has been limiting women's participation in the workforce. And apart from that, the challenges that women have been facing in the urban areas would be further compounded by the gendered expectations, right? So it would be further compounded by the gendered expectations, and even they very often lack access to capital, right? So they lack access to capital. So capital in the sense that a woman very often less preferred when it comes to banks granting institutional credit. So in fact, so if they start any entrepreneurial ventures, they require capital, right? So they require hand-holding support. So all these factors have been limiting women's participation in the workforce. So however, there is a need for the comprehensive policies that should look into all these shortcomings, and these policies must emphasize on women's workforce participation and entrepreneurship, skill development, hand-holding support, market linkages, microfinance. So all these things are very, very important. So therefore, when we talk about the any policy, so these policies should actually look at both demand and supply side concerns in rural areas as well as the urban areas as well. For example, when we talk about the agriculture and allied activities, these policy matters should actually look into water, marketing, institutional credit, or agri credit for the women who have engaged in agriculture and allied activities. And in fact, in order to further enhance women's workforce participation in urban areas, there is a need to develop facilities like toilets and trench facilities at the workplaces for mothers. And even all these things are very important further improve women's workforce participation. And at the same time, we need to sanitize the workplaces from the sexual harassment. So we need to provide a safe working conditions for the women to increase women's workforce participation. So when we talk about the women's workforce participation, women's economic participation, so it will contributes to the family's income, and apart from that, it will also increases their status in the society, right? So because women become financially independent and self-reliant, right? So in fact, studies have shown that women earnings increases their resilience, particularly during COVID-19 pandemic. Whenever we talk about the resilience of women, working women were more resilient to the negative impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. So therefore, these factors have to be taken into consideration when we talk about increasing women workforce participation. Okay, so collectivization of market access, some of the policy recommendations. So when we talk about the policy recommendations and future outlook, so we need to talk about the collectivization and market access. Now when we talk about the collectivization, self-help group is one of the best example of this collectivization. Okay, so collective efforts through self-help groups and federations can actually further amplify the impact of economic interventions for women. Okay, so it would amplify or increase the economic interventions for women, and these platforms will also enable collective bargaining and skill development and access to larger markets, thereby enhancing their economic outcomes as well. So apart from that, so we need to focus on creating enabling environment. So creating enabling environment essentially means that choose workplaces of women, and in those workplaces there should be a safe workplace and adequate sanitation facilities and childcare facilities. So all these things have to be taken into consideration. So when we talk about enabling or creating enabling environment for women, so these things would certainly enhances women's workforce participation over a period of time. So next important article is with respect to the quadrilateral framework and BRICS, and how Quad and BRICS are very important for India, because both these organizations are different right? So they are different organizations, but how these two different organizations are important. So because yesterday we have discussed about the strategic autonomy, right? So balancing between the competing interests. So therefore we can say that when we talk about Quad and BRICS, India has been balancing on the competing interests between these two organizations, because Quad is a West alliance. Okay, so West-led grouping, and BRICS is essentially a grouping of China, Russia, and India, Brazil, and South Africa. So therefore we'll understand the context is that India's strategic alignment in both Quad and BRICS, so it actually gained a lot of prominence. Okay, so India's strategic alignment in the Quad and BRICS have gained a prominence, particularly with respect to shifting global dynamics. As of now, the global dynamics have been shifting at a faster pace, and there is a rise of multiple centers of power, and there are also geopolitical rivalries as well. When we talk about geopolitical rivalries, US and China, India, China, geopolitical rivalries, examples of geopolitical rivalries, and even Russia and USA. So therefore there are also geopolitical rivalries and even regional security concerns. For example, China is a regional security concern for India, and even multilateral frameworks are also started evolving across the world. So this is the global context. However, these engagements are crucial as India actually navigating its foreign policy amidst the changing international order, and even balancing security imperatives with multilateral cooperation and regional stability. Right. So when we talk about India's strategic engagement with the Quad countries, so Quad essentially comprises of 4 different countries. So India's participation in the Quad group of countries actually underscores India's strategic alignment. Okay, so it's strategic alignment with countries like United Nations, Japan, and Australia. So Quad was established essentially to counter a Chinese threat. So there has been a growing Chinese threat, and growing Chinese threat is actually one of the security challenge for India. So therefore India joined like-minded nations to counter Chinese security threat, especially in the Indo-Pacific region, because in the Indo-Pacific region Chinese influence has been increasing many-fold over a period of time. And in fact, when we look at the Quad, so Quad is not a very narrow organization or a narrow grouping. So it was not just established for the military purposes only, rather its agenda has been broadening over a period of time, right? So include technological cooperation, supply chain resilience. So all these factors are being involved. So when we talk about the a Quad grouping, right? So it not just focuses on the military aspect or military security, but rather it includes technological cooperation, supply chain resilience, and it has been reflecting India's interest in shaping a comprehensive regional security framework. So India wanted to shape a comprehensive regional security framework through engaging with the like-minded countries in the Quad grouping. So however, when we talk about the Quad grouping, within the Quad, so there are divergent security priorities for different countries within the Quad, because India actually a part of the Quad grouping, and it also understood the strategic objectives and the strategic challenges and opportunities. So when it became part of the Quad grouping. So however, if you look at India's approach with respect to Quad, so it actually emphasizes that Quad is not an Asian NATO. So this is the stance of India. Quad should not be seen as Asian NATO. It should not be seen as a military alliance. So that is the stand of India with respect to the Quad. And in fact, India is not the formal treaty ally. So this stance of India that a Quad is not, Asian NATO, essentially, is about balancing regional security concerns with India's independent foreign policy concerns, right? So there are a number of challenges and even the strategic considerations when we talk about India's engagement with these Quad member countries. Okay, so since with respect to Quad, India is aversive to making Quad as a security alliance or a military alliance, or making Quad as an Asian NATO. So therefore, US has formed another grouping within the Indo-Pacific region, and that grouping is known as AUKUS. So Australia and UK and US. So these three countries have come together and they formed this grouping called AUKUS. So this has been highlighting that there has been evolving military dynamics in the Indo-Pacific region. So these military dynamics essentially focuses on countering Chinese influence in the Indo-Pacific region. And in fact, when we talk about India's approach, India follows the cautious approach. Okay, so India's approach is a very cautious approach because India follows the policy of strategic autonomy, and India will not go into the arms of any single group of countries or any single country. So therefore, it actually the AUKUS is purely a security or military organization, but India follows the policy of strategic autonomy, and in fact India also has concerns over the militarization of the Indo-Pacific region. So India don't want that the Indo-Pacific region should be militarized by countries like US and UK and other European countries rather. So India actually looking for a comprehensive regional framework so that respects the rights of all countries. There should be no assertiveness, no aggression. So it is also in line with the free, open and inclusive Indo-Pacific region, free from the military confrontation or military alliances. So however, there are number of geopolitical dilemmas for India. Now when we talk about the geopolitical dilemmas, now on the other hand, one hand India has been engaging with the Quad group of countries, and on the other hand India has also been engaging with the BRICS group of countries. Okay, so India has been collaborating with these two different group of countries, and they are very often having the contrasting world views. Okay, so therefore these differing agendas between Quad grouping and BRICS actually poses strategic dilemmas for India. So when it comes to balancing the security alignments with multilateral cooperation, India has been facing certain dilemmas. However, when we talk about the policy imperatives for India, so India's approach towards BRICS and Quad grouping, it actually necessitates careful diplomacy to leverage benefits from both groupings while safeguarding the national interests. Okay, so that is the way forward that the author has been talked about. So next important article is with respect to Karnataka's domicile quota in jobs bill, right? So what is the context? The context is that recently Karnataka state legislature passed a bill. So this bill has been mandating a minimum quota in the private jobs for the locals or domiciles of the state of Karnataka. So we'll look into it. Okay, so the issue of job reservations for the local candidates in the private sector has sparked a debate and even legal challenges in India, because Karnataka was not the first state which actually passed such a legislation. Before Karnataka also there were states like Andhra Pradesh, Haryana, and those states actually passed such legislations mandating a certain reservation, a certain quota based on domicile in the private employment opportunities. So these states that we have just discussed have attempted to mandate quotas for the local residents of that particular state in the private sector jobs, and therefore the question is, it has also raised the constitutional questions, and even these states also facing opposition from different quarters including the private sector, because private sector's concern is that it very often compromises the efficiency of the employees. So that is one factor. Okay, so what is this domicile based reservation and what are the challenges when we talk about the domicile based reservations? So the debate over job quotas, now the governments are not able to provide employment opportunities. They're not able to provide employment opportunities, government employment or the private employment. But in order to solve this particular issue, and state governments also very often felt that people from other states are coming into their own states and they are taking up the employment opportunities in that particular state, and that has been creating the problem of unemployment for the youth in that particular state. So that is the view of these different states. However, the debate over job quotas for local candidates in private sector has actually created legal and constitutional discussions in recent times, right? So when we talk about the constitution, what constitution mandates with respect to reservations for the backward sections as a measure of affirmative action. So Indian constitution upholds fundamental rights such as freedom to move and settle anywhere within the country under Article 19. And in fact, Article 15 of the Indian constitution prohibits discrimination based on religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth, forming the basis for the affirmative action laws in India. Okay, so when we talk about the affirmative action laws under Article 16 of the Indian Constitution, so affirmative action laws ensures specifically under Article 16, so equality of opportunity in public employment. In fact, so it also allows or permits the states to reserve posts for the backward classes, right? So they have been facing historical injustice, and this is a measure of affirmative action, and Article 16 allows states to reserve a certain public post for the backward classes who are not adequately represented. And apart from that, Article 16 also says that states can also prescribe residence requirement, but one condition is that but it should not be solely based on place of birth, so to ensure fair representation in the state services. Okay, now what are the legal challenges and court views on domicile quotas? So in fact, courts have consistently delivered various judgments, and they also struck down laws which have been imposing quotas in the public employment beyond permissible levels, because Indira Sawhney judgment has held that a 50% reservation benefit should not increase the 50% quota. So therefore, courts have consistently struck down laws which are imposing domicile quotas in public employment beyond the permissible limits. And in fact, there are cases also in Andhra Pradesh and Haryana, so which also reserved a certain portion of jobs in the private sector for the youth from that particular state. So they also attempted to enforce domicile quotas in private sector. So they also faced constitutional scrutiny from various courts. And even Supreme Court has also highlighted certain concerns with respect to reservation in the private sector or quotas in the private sector by these respective states, because it could foster regionalism over national unity, and it would also result in populist appeals as well. So that is against the unity and integrity of the nation by fostering regionalism. So that was the observation of the Supreme Court with respect to the reservations in quotas, right? So that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. So if you like our work, please subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.